This is the Nebraska Broadcasters Association History Project. I'm Neil Nelkin with the NBA. Today we're going to be talking to a guy who started out, grew up in the very small western Nebraska panhandle town of Sidney, Nebraska, and has progressed to the point where today he is the Dean of Omaha Television Newscasters. I want to welcome John Knicely. John, thanks for your time.
Well, thanks, Neil. Yeah, you left out one thing. Sidney was a powerhouse in athletics, too.
Still is.
Still is. Well, in our minds.
When you were growing up in Sidney, did you have any idea of what you wanted to do? Did the spark of broadcasting light itself while you were there?
Not necessarily. My mom was a newspaper columnist for the Sidney Telegraph. And so we took journalism in high school, yearbook and everything. And so that was interesting, but I didn't really like writing as much, so I thought, well, I'll try broadcast TV in Lincoln, thinking eventually I'll probably become a lawyer like my dad and my brother. And then the door opened, right out of college.
So you went to the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. You studied broadcast journalism.
Yep.
And you were talking a little earlier, before we started taping, a couple of the people that you were involved with there at the university, some pretty good names, and some who have been with the broadcasters over the years for a long time.
Yeah, Dr. Walkland especially comes to mind. You have to listen closely when he would be telling you something that might help you. But he told the whole class, never assume anything, which we didn't understand then, but now we do.
Yeah, Larry Walkland has been with the association for decades, I think most recently as our treasurer, and he and his wife, Karen, have been working for the association all these years. He also went to school with another fellow who has most recently hosted the monthly Governor's Call-In show, and also worked at KRNU, the student station in Lincoln, and that's Rick Alloway.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Rick I knew very well because we took classes together. And he had the perfect voice. You couldn't help but notice. Many
years at KFOR, where you spent some time doing an evening disc jockey show.
I had that for a little while, and then actually it was Dr. Walkland that called me. And, I was out of school. He made the effort to get a hold of me and said, John, there's a weekend sports job in Omaha. You ought to apply for that. So I went down and applied, and then next thing you know, I'm doing the weekend sports. It's kind of a long hair back then, too. For WWT, yeah.
So you started out in sports, and that's where your passion was at that time.
Yeah, loved it. Just still do, but just Nebraska football and everything that comes with it, and college athletics, high school.
That was 1974.
74, I know. It's
a long time ago. You worked at Channel 6 under a legendary sports director. Ray
Stevens, yeah. Yeah, when I came in, I was a total rookie, neophyte, and Ray would be very patient, and I worked hard for him so that he would be able to do other things too, and because I enjoyed, especially the high school beat and doing various series, on different sports in the area, so it was good.
It was a different time because I don't imagine back then we had the capability to do live broadcasts from various events around town. You were doing film.
We were shooting film. We would have to leave at halftime. You never got the winning shot of a game because you had to get it in the soup, the processor, and hope that it didn't get caught in there. But we were the first station, Channel 6 WWT, to get satellite capability, microwave basically.
And then you were able to at least originate some of the programming from the game site.
Yeah, I still remember the first time I was at UNO before a football game doing a live report at 6 o'clock. And at 10 o'clock we had the whole game coverage. We had the play that made the difference in the game. And it was a great advantage for a while. Everybody caught up.
You eventually went through the point where you had tape capability instead of film, so you could edit tape and all of it in color.
Right. Yeah, that was big.
That was a big deal back then.
Yeah. And, the film we shot, it was in color. But I had my own little camera that was, you could do slow-mo with it too. So for sports, it was perfect.
Ideal.
Yeah.
When Bob Bruce left Omaha and moved to Minneapolis, that opened up an opportunity for you.
Yes, it did. Yeah. Then I became the sports director. When Ray left, I actually wanted to be the sports director then, and they found Bob down in Texas, and he did a George Plimpton type stories, you know, where he was taking part in the activity, reporting it, and he was good at it, and it was entertaining, and so I just, you know, became his right-hand man and continued to work, and then got my chance.
You went to St. Louis as a sports director at KTVI. How'd that happen?
Well, I got an offer. Our former general manager became general manager down there. They had an opening. They called and said, I went down and interviewed, and this was just as my first son, my second child was born. So I come back from that trip and said, Sue, we're moving to St. Louis.
She said,
okay. We had, it was comical because I was already down there. I had to be down there before she could get there, but her mom helped her get down there in our van. We had 2 litters of pups, golden retrievers, and then some others we didn't count on. Yeah, it was quite a time.
Quite a complex move.
Yeah.
And then you came back to KETV here in Omaha, and you came back as sports director. That was 1984.
Yes.
How'd that happen? What brought you back?
Well, my wife's from Omaha, and so it was an easy move. And Ray Deppa was the news director, who I worked with here at Channel 6 in the news department. He was just a great example. And so we worked it out and came back and started doing sports. I mean, again, sports, but.
Channel 7 back then in 1984 was not yet the station it went on to become.
Right, yeah. We had a good team that it just really built on, and great chemistry and coverage, and yeah.
It was somewhat embryonic, both for the television station and for you, as you're building your resume, building your career, and gaining confidence.
Yeah, eventually I started doing a segment that really caught on called I Challenge John. And with all the athletic stuff I did growing up, it was an opportunity to, you know, well, to lose to a 10-year-old, basically.
A very popular series, had really good following in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Did you ever get any suggestions for that feature that you just couldn't do or didn't feel was appropriate?
I did, and you know, I'd run it by my wife. Like one of them was flying it's the kind of plane, I don't know how you describe it.
Like an ultralight?
Ultralight, yeah.
Okay.
I think this had a motor itself, so you would take off. It wouldn't be dragged behind to get started. And she said, "No, John, we can't do that." But I did do some interesting stuff. Like, I got a call to go to Carter Lake, and I thought, okay, this is probably water skiing. I know how to do that. Got there, and they handed me a crash helmet, and they said, "John, you see that ramp over there? You're going to go over that."
And you said,
okay. So I was game. And they teach you what to do. They show you there's water that trickles down the ramp. And so it's smooth and you can take off. It's slippery. They said, whatever you do when you hit the ramp, don't pull back on your rope. And so, okay, I thought I got that. But then I'm behind the boat coming around that corner, and you see that ramp in front of you and you keep getting closer and closer. You got to move over. And then it's like the point of no return. And so, sure enough, hit that ramp, pull back on my rope. And you always do that water skiing. And my skis just started to go up like that. And next thing I know, I was looking at heaven, flying through the air, and landed flat on my back. I went off the ramp, but it wasn't a graceful landing. So I thought, well, when I come up from underwater, at least these guys will be there to help me. They were laughing.
Of course.
In the boat.
Have you done something like that since? You jumped again since then?
I tried it again the same day, and I landed, and then fell down.
Is there video of that?
Yeah, there is somewhere, yeah. Yeah, I'd love to have it.
You need to dig that out and get it on the air sometime. Then you come back to WOWT leaving the sports world and coming back here as a news anchor. How did that happen to make you move from sports to news?
It was kind of interesting. And one way I got the idea was Bob Bruce, we talked about. In Minneapolis, he did sports. And then he became a news anchor. He went to some other market out east. And I'd never thought of that, yeah, no, that's a way you could advance and not have to move your family. By then we had 5 kids.
And how many dogs?
Yeah, right. We were down to 1 dog then.
Okay.
And so my brother-in-law was in the sales staff over here, and somehow we got to talking, and there was an opening and potential opening. So we had these clandestine meetings. One was at Cecil's Coffee Shop on Dodge, a breakfast with the general manager. And we talked about the possibilities, and my contract was coming up, and I was still negotiating at 7. And so 6, right up to the last minute, I wasn't sure, because they were secretly getting Jim Flowers to cross the street too.
From 7 to 6.
Chief meteorologist. And I didn't even know that was going on. Next thing I know, there's an announcement, Jim Flowers is moving over to Channel 6. And then they were like, well, can we really do 2 people? Can we really pull this off? And then it got down to the last day, and yes. And so.
Who was the general manager here then?
Randy Oswald.
Okay.
Yeah, great guy.
Great guy. And, been in the market, in and out of the market a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So about the same time, that's when we started 10 at 10, which was a big, just a new approach to the news. 10 minutes of nonstop news.
Right.
No weather, lead-off sports.
Made a big difference in the television station and the ratings too.
It did. It was a great brand, and we actually, we delivered what we promised. And if you wanted to go to bed at 10:10, you got a good feel for the news.
You knew what was going on in town.
Yeah.
And those were different days. Channel 3, KMTV, was at that time a serious player. It had been number 1 in the market for a long, long time.
You're right. Yeah, they had some great talent that came through, and I remember one anchor, I don't remember his name, but I think he ended up going to another market, and and that was difficult for them, I think.
So you are teamed with Pat Prasad.
Yeah.
Had you known her before?
No, I just knew of her, and we kind of had some meetings beforehand, like had lunch and had my wife there too, so we could kind of break the ice and start a relationship. It was kind of weird. It's almost like you're dating somebody. I didn't have that in sports, it's just me. And so we worked on just getting to know each other and being natural, and it really came along very well.
You two hit it off pretty well, and you gelled as an on-air team. And I'm assuming it was successful for you. I know it was successful for the television station.
Yeah, it definitely was, yeah. Yeah. One of the first things I did when I came over, I had, there was a non-compete clause. And so when I left, 7 immediately went to an attorney, and they filed an injunction, to keep me from going on the air. And then finally, a judge made a ruling like a month later, well, he's not so unique, you can't keep him off the air. I wasn't sure if that was what to think about that.
Not so unique.
But it did open the door. And so I proposed to my news director.
Who was?
John Clark.
John Clark.
Yeah, sorry. And that we would, because North Omaha was in the news a lot, and that I would go and live there with a photographer for 3 days. Spend the night, 2 nights at Hilltop Housing, which was a hot spot. And so we all agreed, and we did that and produced like a series of stories that were great stories. I mean, because of the people that we featured and what else was going on besides what the news, would present at 10 o'clock. And it was quite an experience. It was
both for you and the producers and the photographers.
Yeah. My photographer was Roger Hamer, kind of a street smart guy, and I had a contact in the community that kind of spread the word we were coming, and so it wouldn't be like, well, who are these guys and what are they up to? And But that first night was interesting, and we were talking to a woman who lived there, and it was about dusk, and all of a sudden there was a gunshot sound, and she said, "Time to go in," and just boom, we were just left standing there. And so about 3 in the morning, we get a knock on our door, and we were just sleeping in a sleeping bag. You know, it's not even furnished. And I'm wake up. Roger's out in the living room, and I'm thinking, don't open the door. Not at this hour. Don't open the door. Next thing I know, I hear the door opening. And so I got up, and several guys were out there. They said, "Listen, if you want to see police brutality, look right over here." And so everybody knew we were there. But we got some really good stories.
Does that feature still exist somewhere?
It would on the archives here, yeah. We called it 3 Days in the Jets. They called the people that lived there, called them the projects, the Jets. Mm-hmm. And just really made some, in that amount of time, some good relationships with people, you know. Visited with them later.
One of your highlights is building relationships with people. You believe in that, not just doing stories about people, but getting to know people. It makes a difference to you.
Well, it does. I mean, it's people have such a background of stories in their own life, and where they came from, how they're molded, and what they're doing. And it's really interesting when you get past the initial layers and really get down to who people are, you know.
You've done and seen things that most of us don't as you're covering various sports and news events over the years. You've been to the Olympics a couple of times now, done that, both summer and winter games, and then also World Series in 1982.
Yeah, I was doing sports in St. Louis. They played Milwaukee, 7 games. Great series. You know, when you go to Milwaukee, their whole parking lot is just one big tailgate. We got these big satellite trucks sitting there, reporting from on top of the truck. So you have a great view, but you're pretty visible too. And it was clear to people, Milwaukee fans, we were from out of town. So we get a few unwelcomes, you know.
Did they bring you food?
No.
No?
No.
They're supposed to do that. You also been to the Masters at Tom Seekman's first appearance in 1989. That had to have been pretty exciting.
That was really special, yeah, because you know the mystique of the Masters and how hard it is to get there. But we were there for some of the practice rounds, and so the media access just puts you in great position when you're out there just watching the event. And so Tom played well, just not quite well enough, but first Nebraska golfer to ever play in the Masters, and he did it twice. That was great, and this was the caveat of the trip for me. They have a lottery for the media, and if they draw your name in the press room, you get to play the course on Monday. Well, they drew my name, and Stu Pospisil at the Omaha World Herald. And so we got there Monday, term was over, we're getting our clubs out, and the guy comes up and says, "Sorry guys, we had too much rain last night. Can't play." And no rain check. So
it would have been
any
nice.
golfer cringes when they hear that.
Yeah. You've been to a lot of the great Nebraska games over the years. Nebraska, Oklahoma, the bowl games. That never gets old.
No. And you know what was good back then is the fact you had access to players. Now, the way that it's run, it's a news conference. So you ask a question, every other outlet gets it too, gets the answer. And you can't really get in with personal things that you find are interesting and you just want to bring that story, and you alone. But back then, we could get them in the locker room after a game. We could get them on a Tuesday all to ourselves. We just request players. And it was just a different era back then. So
same thing
you
with
got
the
to
coaches.
know the players. And the coaches, too. Yeah.
Many times Tom Osborne would give one station or another an exclusive, not necessarily meaning to, but just saying something off the cuff, and it would come across as an exclusive.
Well, I tell you what, he did give me one that was just great. Any Nebraska fan. On Sunday, you know, they break down game films after the game on Saturday. So we got to be in there while they were looking at the films. And so it's all the coaches around a table. Tom's at the end of the table with a projector then. and he's running it manually himself. So he would start it, be watching, everybody be watching it, and then he'd say, whoop, stop it, back it up. Okay, now look at the right tackle. Watch this. Play it again. Stop it. Say, anybody see that? Generally not. He said, watch them one more time, and then they get it. That's a weakness we can, take for the game, for the upcoming game.
He was a master of the strategy. He saw things that nobody else could.
I know, yeah. And you appreciate it. With the media, he would not break down into detail at all.
With the team, he certainly did.
Yeah, yeah. And the quarterbacks, they met with him separately.
Well, I know a lot of the players who played under Tom Osborne still talk about the things that he taught them that they didn't see anywhere else, but they learned from Coach Osborne, and they still use today.
Yeah, and he spent times on, building character in players too. And so that stays with them when they leave, and his integrity, just a match. I think there was one game, a famous story, I think they were playing in Colorado, and they put in a special play for their first play from scrimmage, and he had told the coaches or some of the players, this is going to go for a touchdown. And it did. First play from their offensive in the game. So it's the kind of guy he was.
He was the best there is.
Yeah.
Still is. Nobody's compared to him since. You've done a lot of interviews with a lot of different people over the years. One fellow who actually worked here in Omaha went on to national prominence, Tom Brokaw.
Yeah.
You did an interview with him when he was at NBC.
Yeah, he was just retiring as the anchor, so I got to go up there, and we hired a freelance photographer there, and just had a chance to visit about news, and it was interesting, and just to see the whole setup, and it's fun to be around that.
Did he talk about his origins in Omaha?
Trying to remember.
Or maybe he didn't remember. That had been a lot of years ago when he was at Channel 3.
He would remember because those are such, building years for him.
A lot of personalities in the sports world that either came through or you had access to them when you were covering sports. There's a list here. I won't go over the list, but there are some of the biggest names in the world of sports. What was that like, meeting them, and what did you learn from so many of these people?
One thing you learn is they're really good at what they do, but they're just like you and me. I mean, they have things outside of their sport that they have to deal with and life, and they're just people. And some of them more gracious than others. Like Ozzie Smith with St. Louis, he was just very approachable. And a guy like Bruce Sutter, who was their ace out of the bullpen, he was so tired of doing interviews. If he did one, he would just say, well, I threw it up there, it sank, and that's it. He had that little ball that would just go in the... Pretty
descriptive.
Yeah.
Some of the awards that you've been presented with over the years, things like the Omaha Press Club, Face on the Barroom Floor. That's a pretty exciting presentation, and it's still there.
That's true. Yeah, we've had a couple of Christmas parties there, and some of the younger people, they spotted it on the wall, like, John, your picture's up there, It was a special night, though, because you get to bring in your whole family, and I had a whole bunch of people, like especially guys you golf with and stuff. They were so rowdy, we put them in another room. But Mary Maxwell emceed for me.
Wow.
She is so much fun. Just a character.
That's an MC. Not everybody gets that honor. And then you were also presented with the UNL Journalism Alumni Award.
Yeah.
That's another big deal.
Well, I really appreciated that. I mean, it was like something you didn't think about. It came out of the blue, but you appreciate them paying attention to you and highlighting that. So I was very thankful.
You and Sue have been married for how long now?
45 years. I'm glad I got that right. Yeah.
As we're taping this in 2023. You have 5 children and 12 grandchildren. That's got to be a highlight of your life.
It is, yeah. We just had our 12th last week as we're taping this. And we had a girl, then we had 2 boys. Then we thought, maybe we'll get another girl. We had twin boys after that. So girl, 4 boys. And just so much special time together. And with the extended family, too. It's really close. We all vacation together every summer. And there's just rich, you know.
Yeah, after all you've done, that's really what matters.
It is, yeah, especially. It's not wasted time by any means. It's
very special event in your history, a honor flight back to Washington, D.C. with your dad.
Yeah.
Can you describe that?
Well, it was wonderful. Dad flew a B-24 in the war, flew the hump in India.
When you say the hump, that's the Himalayas.
Yeah, flying supplies, and it was very dangerous, you know, to get up that altitude and then to get back. And for him to go on that trip, because he was just so thankful for all the men and women that served when he did and what was into it. We actually got to the airport. We were just sitting waiting to get on the plane, and the guy that he sat next to while we were waiting was a B-24 pilot, if you can believe it. And so they talked back and forth. And then when we got to the Washington, D.C., came off the plane, it was a line of people on each side applauding. I mean,
that kind of appreciation.
I'm thinking about it, yeah.
And you got to take it all in. I'm sure there are a lot of pictures.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, when we did an interview then there outside Arlington Cemetery, then the memorial, he was choking up as he was talking about it. It was that special.
That emotional.
Yeah.
Your son, John Jr., followed in your footsteps for a while, didn't he?
He did. He went to Baylor and he studied, so he didn't go to the same university. But yeah, he got his first TV job in Paducah, Kentucky. Actually worked at Channel 42 for a little bit, kind of like an intern. Mm-hmm. And Paducah, then Charlotte, and then Dallas, St. Louis, and then Seattle. And then they've got a young son, and she's from St. Louis, so he started a business. And because he was the morning anchor and all the, the hours of
the long hours and early morning.
Yeah. But it was fun. I got to visit him when he was on air out there. We got a picture on his set together. And great guy, great young man.
There was an incident in your life that was traumatic, to say the least, with your daughter, Krista. She was living in Waco, Texas.
Right. She went to Baylor. Yeah, we got a call. Oh my gosh, it was probably 11 o'clock at night. And her first thing on the phone was, Dad, I got attacked. And I mean, as a father, like, what? And yeah, somebody had broken into a house. She was waiting for 2 friends to come to pick her up, go to a gathering. And this guy broke in. She was alone and, had a mask on and grabbed her and basically was kind of choking her. And she fought for everything she had. And while that was going on, the 2 guys showed up that were picking her up, and they looked in the window and saw this. And they remembered as they drove in the neighborhood, they saw a police car. One of them ran to the police car. They came around, went in with their guns up. They didn't shoot because Krista could have gotten hurt. But this guy bolted and ran. They were not in great physical shape themselves, but the 2 guys were. And they ran him down and tackled him. And one of them gave him a hit from me, a little blow, I found out later. And so it's just so traumatic. And for Krista, it just disrupted her college. And there was the trial. He was convicted. He's in prison because there were other women, too. But at one point, I had, after the conviction, no chance to get up and speak to the guy in the courtroom. And so I wrestled with it. I mean, when we were sitting in the trial, it was like he was right over here. I had this thought, I can jump right over that thing and just grab him and just, let him have for all I could think of. But scripture came to mind the night before, and I thought, okay, I know what I need to do. So I went up and told him that me, my daughter, my family, we forgive you for what you did, and you're going to have a just punishment here for what you did. But I had to free us of the whole bitterness that could continue with us and end it right there. And so it's still a recovery for Krista, but man, she bounced back, and she got in the pageant, Miss Nebraska, and became Miss Nebraska. And her platform was for women. Went to Miss America, and I got to go and escort her on the stage, and talk about a great moment. So it was all fantastic. And now she and her husband are just so involved in our community here. They've got 6 kids, and what was bad has just turned out to be so good.
Validates your faith, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Now I'm getting tearing up again here. I don't know what you're doing to me, Neil.
Well, you taught Sunday school for a while.
Yeah.
And your faith is an important part of your life.
It is, yeah. When I was not far out of college, I just realized, where am I going with my life? I've got great things happening with work and friends and everything, but it was empty. And so on a Christmas night, I was working at Christmas Eve. I just got down on my knees and I said, all right, Lord, I'm not going to fight this. I give you my life, and you use it the way you want to use it. And so he has ever since. And it's just purpose, And
it's worked out well for you.
Yeah.
You are very much involved with young people and working with young people here at the television station. I know you see a lot of young people day in and day out. Do you feel an obligation to bring them along and tell them how it was in your good old days?
I don't think they want to hear that, but I do love to just compliment them on great work. And when you see it, you're just, it's fantastic. And you build relationships and through your interaction throughout the day.
When you do news and you cover all of the stories, and a lot of them are not what you would call positive stories, how do you keep from being cynical about society, about the country, about young people?
That's a great question, because it is constant, and it's almost like, well, there's no progress. It's happening over and over and over again, in fact, maybe escalating. But I think it's my faith that I realize that, these things are going to happen, and society is this way, but there's a greater calling than that. And at the same time, you balance it with good stories, positive. That's why I do a feature called Nicely Done, where you can really focus on something or somebody that's really doing something in our community that you're not aware of. And so there's a lot of them.
Do you ever take for granted the impact that the television station has in the community? The fact that you're in people's homes every night in some intimate relationships with viewers? Yeah,
you don't think about it a lot, but when you go out in public, then you kind of see it, because, people will talk to you and just comfortably. It's like, I know you.
Yeah, and they do know you because you're in their homes every day.
Yeah.
What about your outlook for the future of the industry, both news and television in general? You've seen a lot of change over the years. Do you have any opinions on where things are going and how we're going to get there?
Yeah, I think the one good thing that we have is we do local. And so to get the local reporting of what's going on around us, in our community, this is where you go to get it. And so that's going to be a constant, which separates us. But there's so many outlets, with the internet and Instagram, and that people get their Twitter, where they get their news, especially the younger generation.
But that can't always be trusted. John Knicely can be trusted.
That's a good point. Right.
You've got the history, the reputation, and the integrity to deliver news that people can believe.
That's what you hope for.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
John, thanks so much for your time. This has been great. Learned a lot about you. And,
yeah, you got me choked up a couple times.
Well, that's good. John Knicely is our guest on the program today. I want to thank the general manager here at WOWT, Jim McKernan, the operations manager, Jeff Sabin, Jim Tim, the executive director of the Nebraska Broadcasters Association, and Marty Riemenschneider, the executive director emeritus for the Nebraska Broadcasters Association. And for the NBA, I'm Neil Nelkin.